Good morning, BBYO. It's a great privilege and honor to be here at BBYO, to hear, see, and feel the wonderful work, dedication, and devotion of you young leaders. Thank you, Matt, for inviting me here. 23 years ago, in 1995, Israel's Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, was assassinated. He was assassinated because Rabin devoted all of his life to the security of Israel and understood that only peace with our neighbors can really achieve that goal. He was assassinated by a Jew, by an Israeli, all because of sinat chinam and sinat achim, hatred between brothers, which along all our history was the biggest threat to Judaism. About 20 years earlier, in 1976, Israel Prime Minister Rabin sent us, the IDF's commander unit, Sayeret Matkal, under the command of Yoni Netanyahu, Bibi's elder brother, to rescue hostages that were kidnapped by Palestinians that hijacked an airplane that flew from Ben Gurion, and they landed the airplane in Entebbe, Uganda in Africa. At that time, I was a young lieutenant and commanded one of the team in that raid. On the morning of the 4th of July, 1976, precisely the day that the United States celebrated its 200th Independence Day, we made our way back to Israel from Entebbe, Africa, in 4 Hercules planes with 105 freed Israeli hostages, but also with the body of our commander, Yoni Netanyahu, who had been killed when he led the attack. Years later, when I was the commander of the same commander unit, Sayeret Matkal, and had to lead additional operations beyond enemy lines, I often thought about the dilemmas Yoni faced before and during that operation in Entebbe and the tremendous courage he demonstrated. The hijacking of an Israeli airline by Palestinian terrorists and the taking of Israelis hostages was not a new story. In 1968, 8 years before the hijacking to Entebbe, an El Al plane, the national airline of Israel, was hijacked by Palestinian terrorists to Algiers. El Al pilot Maoz Poraz was the first officer of the hijacked plane. He, the rest of the Israel passengers, the crew, were released after they were in custody for 40 days in Algeria. A decade after Operation Entebbe, I became the commander of the Matkal Commander Unit, and Yitzhak Rabin was the defense minister. He sent me on many operations behind enemy lines, most of which are top classified even today. In 1995, the year of Yitzhak Rabin's assassination, many events occurred in Israel. Kobi Richter, a young scientist, developed the first stent. I don't know if you know what a stent is. It's the small spring which placed in cardiac procedures in the heart of patients that need that procedures. And since then, this stent has been implanted in hundreds of thousands of cardiac patients around the globe, saving many lives. That very Kobi Richter had been years earlier a fighter pilot in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, during which he downed in dogfights five Syrian fighter planes who were on their way to attack Israel. At the same Air Force base in the Green Valley of Emek Israel, where Kobi Richter served, so did Major in Reserve Maoz Poraz, the pilot I mentioned earlier who was kidnapped with his plane to Algeria by Palestinian terrorists 5 years earlier. In the Yom Kippur War, Israel was attacked by Syria in the north and Egypt in the south. From the same air base that Major Kobi Richter flew to protect the State of Israel against the Syrian invasion, his friend, Major in Reserve Maoz Poraz, took off to fight attacking Egyptian planes. In one of the assaults, Major in Reserve Poraz's plane was shot down and he was killed. His son, Nir, was 2 years old when his father was killed. Nir never really got to know his father. Years later, Nir Poraz joined the Sayeret Matkal Commando Unit. After 5 years of challenging and dangerous service in this commando unit, Captain Nir Poraz was about to complete his army service and begin his life as a civilian. During a pre-release vacation on October 94, he was urgently called to return to the unit to lead the operation to rescue Nachshon Waxman, an Israeli soldier who had been kidnapped earlier by Hamas terrorists and was being held hostage. Being the first warrior to burst into the house in which the Hamas held Waxman, Nir was hurt and then killed along with Waxman, the hostage. In 1995, the year that Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated, 23 years after Major in Reserve Maoz Poraz, a pilot, was killed in the Yom Kippur War, and 2 years after his son, Captain Nir Poraz, a team commander in Sayeret Matkal, was killed, Kobi Richter, a young scientist and former great fighter pilot in the Israeli Air Force, named the stent he invented in the name of Captain Nir Poraz. He called his amazing Israeli invention the Nir stent, in memory of his friend Major Reserve Maoz Poraz's son Nir. The Nir stent, the stent in memory of Nir, who of everlasting memory, is implanted today in the hearts of hundreds of thousands of people worldwide and have saved many lives. So in a nutshell, this is the entire Israeli story and in fact of Zionism. It is the Zionist story in which you BBYO teens are a strong link. On one hand, and struggle for our right to exist as Jews, as Israelis, and on the other hand, being innovative and leaders making contribution to all of humanity. And you, great BBYO leaders, you are another strong ring in the chain of the Jewish leaders. And in our commitment to all of humanity. Thank you very much.
Boker Tov, BBYO! So great. It's such a privilege to be here with you today. I came 2 days ago from Puerto Rico. Yeah. An amazing island that was devastated by one of the worst Hurricane Maria. We have an Israeli team with Jewish American volunteers on the ground from day 2, providing the people of Puerto Rico with access to clean water, with psychological support, and with medical support. You know, when I was your age, in high school in Israel, like every Israeli, I loved to travel, I loved service, and I cared about my country, and I was looking for a way to mix all these passions that I have. So after the IDF service, I did what many Israelis do. I went to India. Yeah, we need to open a BBYO in India. That's the next. And from India, I continued to Nepal. And I stayed in Nepal for 3 years, volunteering and working with street children. And I learned a very useful language, Nepalese. And after 3 years in Nepal of working with street children, I was finally able to go back to Israel and start my life. But then a terrible disaster happened, the tsunami in Japan. 20,000 people lost their life. 500,000 people lost their homes. And I was called by the person who started IsraAID to lead a relief mission to Japan. So I thought to myself, why not? I love sushi. So let's go to Japan. But when I arrived to Japan, the level of devastation was so hard. And I don't know if you can see on the right this picture of boat that was stuck and arrived on a wave of 120 feet. Really, the level of devastation was unbelievable. I was working for 3 years in Japan, and then another disaster in different part of the world, the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, and I was called to lead a relief mission in Sierra Leone. And really, it was terrifying, but I spent about a year in Sierra Leone. And then in 2015, another disaster, the earthquake in Nepal. So I went back to Nepal 2 days after the earthquake, and with an Israeli search and rescue team, we managed to pull out the last survivor of the earthquake, a lady who was buried in the rubble for 6 days, for 130 hours, without food or water. Thank you. And from the summer of 2015, I spent a lot of my time, and we have teams of Israelis, Americans, Israelis, Jews, and Arabs working to provide support for Syrian refugees in Greece. Now think about it. In Greece, we had 5,000 to 7,000 refugees arriving every day on these rubber boats. And you know, these small rubber boats was originally made to carry up to 30 people, but I actually seen 150 people on boats. And in this small part between Turkey and Greece, where thousands of Syrian refugees escaped, because the boats were overcrowded, a lot of people didn't know how to swim. We lost more than 3,000 people just in the last 2 years. So it's really an unbelievable tragedy. But think about it. These people are arriving from Syria. Some are from Iraq, Afghanistan. They never seen a Jewish person in their life. And the first people they see when they reach the shores of Greece are this group of Israelis and Jews, and with this logo and this Star of David called IsraAID. So we always think that they probably think they took the wrong boat, right? They probably think they ended up in Haifa or in Tel Aviv or God knows where. But it's also an incredible opportunity. These people suffer the worst atrocities a person could think of, and then the first people who save them, who provide them medical support, are a group of Israelis. So it's an amazing opportunity to build bridges, thank you, and to change people's perspective. And I remember one day, I was there on the shore, and we got a message that a boat capsized just before it reached the shore. So our medical team rushed there, and thank God that day we were able to pull everyone out. And I was pulling this cute Syrian girl that you see here in the picture. And I think she was about 4 or 5 years old. And she was literally shivering and shaking in my hands. And she was suffering from severe hypothermia. Our medical team treated her, and after a few hours she was okay, she survived. Her father was able to pull himself out. He didn't need any treatment, but he was shocked. He couldn't say a word. He looked at us, and it was clear to me that it was the first time he's seen an Israeli person and a Jewish person in his life. And when he finally opened his mouth, he told me something that I always quote. He said, "My worst enemy became my biggest supporter." And the people that's supposed to take care of me in Syria are chasing me away. And to me, it was the first time that I realized how this humanitarian crisis, this humanitarian support that we're now providing in 21 countries, and this year IsraAID reached 2 million people around the world, 2 million people, I realized how this is not only an opportunity to save lives, but also to change lives and to build bridges between Israel, the Jewish community, and the world. And I really invite each and every one of you, and we're looking forward to working together. We just started a program we call the IsraAID Humanitarian Fellowship, supported by the Schusterman Foundation, in which we're bringing university students to join us in 21 countries. So we need each and every one of you on board, because we're, just like yourself, we're part of a global movement of Jewish global activists. Thank you. Toda.